Overhead athletics. Today I want to touch on loaded stretching for the hamstrings so that we can actually develop some strength at the end of the range of motion and improve our range of motion simultaneously. A lot of people do these loaded stretches where they have a barbell on their back and they're leaning forward into a stretch, or they're doing an exercise where they've got a huge barbell load and they're trying to use a stiff leg deadlift. And while those will load the hamstring muscle, they also put a lot of shear stress on the lumbar spine, something that we're not a huge fan of. So we have a couple other options to load these hamstrings up and do it in a more safe manner. We can actually position the nerve in a better way too. So we got a suspension strap here. We put our foot through, we allow our toes to point. We don't pull our toes up. We allow our toes to point, keep our knees slightly flexed, and go forward. So the strap has some instability to it. I have to contract my hamstrings as I go forward, so it's not just a fall forward. It's a nice contraction through the hamstring, nice light contraction. I'm using the hamstring muscle to pull back to here, not so much the back hip. I could make this a hip extension exercise on the other side, the back leg, but I'm going forward, I'm going into it. I can go across a little bit, I can go open a little bit. I find where I have the most limited range of motion, potentially the most weakness, I can hang out, do 20, 25 reps in a nice dynamic stretch like that. From there I can progress to be more loaded, more difficult, and potentially get some more performance benefits out of it by going into a front split position. And I have a couple ways to do this. I can start up top, and all I'm going to do is try to scissor my legs. So I'm pulling with this hamstring, pulling with my back hip flexor. I've got a bench for balance here. And I can start up tall like this. Now as I get more flexibility, I can come down into the stretch here. And I can hold this stretch position. I have to be able to maintain the contraction with my musculature. And I'm coming up and down. I'm not using my back calf muscle. I'm scissoring my legs, my front hamstring, my back hip flexor, and I might do 10 little short range isotonics like that, where I'm going up and down, controlling the range. Each rep takes a couple seconds. I could make them really long duration stretch contractions where I do the stretch, come out of it by 2 inches, utilizing my muscles, hamstring, hip flexor, and then I hold that position for a second, or I can go in and out. What I'm not doing is I'm not going here and just bouncing up and down. It's not like that at all. I go to the end, contract, I can hold this position for 2 to 5 seconds, come a little lower, I can walk my foot back, and I'm 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Give it 3 sets of 10, a couple sets of 15 each side once I have adequate strength. Don't be afraid to start tall, start up high, utilize those muscles, and understand that the higher that I get, the smaller the range of motion that I go through is. When I get down here to the bottom, I can go through a little larger range of motion. Keeping in mind, I'm not pulling the toe back towards my head. Immediately I feel stretch right behind my knee, not where I want to feel it. I'd like to feel the stretch in the hamstring muscle. You can see I don't like this position here, it doesn't feel good. Point my foot, now I can go a lot farther all of a sudden. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we pulling the toes back in a stretch? Well, we're doing it because we've been told to do it for years, and what we see is this has nothing to do with the hamstring. The hamstring muscle attaches to the proximal tibia and the proximal fibula. It doesn't go beyond the ankle. So what the ankle does is independent of the tension on the hamstring. The one thing that does go that distance is our nervous tissue. Our sciatic nerve goes into our tibial nerve complex in the backside, which is largely what we feel. Sometimes we get a little paresthesia, a little numbness, tingling over the top. That's our peroneal complex. So we have to be aware that ankle mobility can affect what happens here, but it's not improving my flexibility of my hamstring. So allow that toe to point, start with the knee bent, place that nervous tissue in a little bit better position, then go into those loaded positions. As you see, I'm not the most flexible guy in the world. I've been working at this a lot myself because I understand that, hey, if we put ourselves in positions where we can tolerate those positions, and then we teach the muscles to contract and get stronger in those positions, You don't need to be that guy who can kick, or that girl who can kick their knee up here while they're sitting here. But if I'm that guy that now can control that range of motion that I just had, I may have more usable flexibility than somebody that can go down and put their head between their knees. You know, I may only get to here, but I can control that range. So we have to understand that loading the muscles, developing some strength at end range can be very, very beneficial, and it can also assist us in gaining flexibility. But we don't want to place stresses on the lumbar spine like you see in stiff leg deadlifts, like you see in good mornings, when we have options that can put the spine in a more favorable position, reduce the shear load, and then improve hamstring flexibility. Understand these are advanced. These are advanced stretching techniques. If you're new to stretching, start with some of our old videos where we've gone through static stretching procedures. We've gone through our reverse hamstring stretch where we start here and we push our butt to the sky and we activate into the range. Start with some of that stuff, and as you get a little more flexible, you can progress to things that incorporate more loading of the muscles in lengthened positions. I'm not at the very limit of my range of motion here. I'm at the limit of the range of motion that I can control. So passively I can go farther, but where can I control my body weight in those positions against gravity? And that's where I'm going to start these exercises. You may be very flexible and you may start with your pelvis this high. You may be very flexible and start with your pelvis this high, depending how much strength you have at end range. So we're just kind of altering the way we think about these things. Maybe a couple sets of 25 with the suspension strap, and maybe 2 sets of 15, 2 sets of 20, or 3 sets of 10, something like that, with our short range isotonic exercise. And then we can also, a little bonus here, incorporate some sort of isometric where we just hold this position for 30 seconds or a minute. Not using this hand except for balance. So we have a lot of options to load up. We have a lot of options to improve our flexibility. Let's make sure we're doing it safely and not going beyond our means. This is Max Wardell, Overhead Athletics. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.